Welcome back to Black and Ginger. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this. And if you just don't have the time today to follow along with this tutorial, no sweat. We're selling it on our website at blackginger.co under the shop tab. This template comes ready to go with everything you need to just plug in your own photos and export the video. You'll be off to the races in just a few minutes. But before we jump into the tutorial, a little backstory on where this animation comes from in my life. Feel free to skip ahead if you just don't care.
People always come up to Flan and I and ask, how did such a goofy looking person with a regrettable haircut score such a hot babe? And I always say that she got really lucky.
That's pretty good.
It was pretty good, right? I got really lucky, but I also have one really valuable skill, and that's that I know some sick motion graphics.
That's true. Sick motion graphics.
Don't do too much. Then I'll have to edit all this sickness that we're throwing in.
I thought you were a sick motion graphic artist.
Well,
Guess
we're
not.
trying to post this video tomorrow, so.
A little over 4 years ago, I see this beautiful girl walking down the street. Now, contrary to what you might assume, I'm not exactly known for having great pickup lines. But I had my trusty camera and my gimbal, so your boy improvised. So I briskly walked up to her, not too fast because I did not want to scare the shit out of her. I just looked her in the eyes and I said, "Has anyone slid in your DMs lately?" And she was all like, "Yeah, like all the time." So I was all like, "Not like this, they haven't. Hold up your phone." So I backed up, got my gimbal shot, and then I walked away like a boss. This mysterious encounter alone probably won her over.
Weirdo.
But not one to rest on my laurels. I went home and got straight to work. Later that night, I'm proud to say I sent her the video that stole her heart forever. Okay, enough story time. Let's get into it. If you're new to After Effects, don't be scared. We're gonna get through this. The first part of this animation is just creating the profile picture with the Instagram story gradient ring around it. Let's get started. So, first step, we want to go to composition, new composition. Let's call this Instagram profile picture, and the composition size 1920 by 1080, frame rate 23976. I set the duration to a minute, background color white. Boom. Very first step, go up here to layer, new shape layer. I don't mean to sound like your dad, but name your damn layers son or girl, whoever, man or woman, name your layers. I'm gonna right click on this layer, rename it to gradient circle. Next thing we want to do is zoom out a little bit and go up here to the ellipse tool and draw a big fat circle, holding down shift so that the circle stays even. And then we want to center justify this circle. So how do we do that? Let's go up here to window, align, and we're going to click align vertically and align horizontally. It's really important that the anchor point is set in the center. Right now it's not, it's off center. So if you're on a Mac, the keyboard shortcut to setting the anchor point to the center is going to be Command Option Home. But if you're on a PC, like I am, it's going to be Control Alt Home and then Control Alt Home. Now our anchor point is set to the center. Next step, let's scale this circle down so that it's just a little bit bigger than the size of our composition bed. It's called gradient because we're going to add a gradient color to it. So let's go up here to Window, Effects and Presets, and in our Effects and Presets window we're going to type gradient. 4-color gradient is what we're looking for. So if you click on that and drag it onto this layer, we have a gradient starting point, but this is not the color that we're looking for. We're looking for these colors. Now I got these colors by going into Google Images and searching for Instagram gradient. I did the work of finding these colors for you guys. I'm gonna put the color numbers in the description of this video so you guys don't have to go and do that. Just copy and paste them like I'm gonna do right now. So watch what I'm doing here. Basically just gonna copy each color. I'm gonna go back to mine, color 1, paste. Next step, we're going to set a keyframe at the beginning of this gradient circle. Then we're going to go forward about like 123. So we set another keyframe here. And on the second keyframe, we're going to scale this down to about 22. Let's zoom back in and play this back. Oh my God. That has to be the most pitiful circle shrink in the history of After Effects. Now we need to spice it up. Here's how we do that. Go to the first keyframe, click on it, right click it, go down to Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease Out. Go to the second keyframe, click on it, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease In. Now let's play it back. Looks better, but it still needs work, right? Because if we go back to what we created over here, look at the movement of this circle. What we're going to do is click on our first keyframe, then we're going to go up here to Graph Editor, click on it. We can zoom in a little. Now what we're looking at here is basically a visual representation of the motion of our object. If we play it back in here, you can see how as this red bar moves over this curve, it's being represented up here in the movement of the shape. These yellow handles are what we're going to manipulate in order to change the speed at which our object shrinks. So if we hold down Shift and we pull this one out, and we hold down Shift and pull this one out, let's play it back. Better, right? I think I wanted to go a little faster in the beginning and slow down even slower. Let's look at this. I mean, I'd say that's pretty spot on, but you're gonna wanna go for a shape similar to what I have here. And we can always tweak it down the line. So much of After Effects and creating animations is making micro adjustments as you create your animation. So for now, let's leave this the way it is. And we're gonna move on to our next step. Next, we're gonna bring in the profile picture we'll be using. So for you, this will be your Instagram profile picture. If you're making this for somebody else, you're going to want to get their profile picture. In our case, we're going to be using our friend Paulina's picture. Paulina was the model in our very first YouTube video, our lens challenge video. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. Side note, my favorite thing about Paulina is that if you go on her Instagram page and look at her pictures, she looks kind of quiet, kind of timid, just really pretty model. But if you ever work with Paulina or you ever meet her, her personality is larger than life and her pictures just do not do justice. So here's Paulina looking like a little quiet princess. Now here's what Paulina's really like in person.
I'm running, I'm sweating, I'm breaking shit. Come on, kids!
Now that we have Paulina's picture pulled in, we want to drop the opacity down a little bit so that way we can move the image to where we want it to be within the circle. Next, go back up to Layer, New, Shape Layer. We're going to rename this Profile, Picture, Circle, and then we're going to draw another ellipse over the picture of Paulina. Now it needs to be smaller than our gradient circle in the background. So if you match kind of something similar to what I have here, you should be Good. We also want to make sure that this circle is centered, so we're going to align it vertically and horizontally. Looks good. We also want to make sure that the anchor point is centered. Control-Alt-Home. Great. Now if we go back over to our profile picture, you'll notice this feature here, Track Matte. If you don't see it, you may have to toggle the switches here. But once you see Track Matte, you're going to click down and alpha matte it to the profile picture circle. Now we're essentially masking just that part of the image. If we move it around underneath, you'll see that it still exists within this profile picture circle, but we're sort of masking it out with this circle. Now we can bring the opacity back up to 100, although we do need to change the anchor point to be in the center. Right now the anchor point for Paulina's photo is justified to the center of the size of the image, but we need it to be in the center of this circle. So how we're going to do that, make sure you have your profile picture layer selected and then press Y on PC. You're basically selecting this button up here, which is the pan behind tool. Now if we hold control as we're moving the anchor point, you see here it latches into this new place super easily the way we need it to. We're good to go. Make sure that on the timeline you have the playback bar right over this keyframe, and then we're going to go back up to the profile picture circle and we're going to set a keyframe there as well for scale. And then we're going to go to the very beginning of the timeline and we're going to set another keyframe for scale, and we're going to set this first keyframe to 0. So now the picture of Paulina is going to grow and meet the gradient circle. But again, it doesn't look good yet. We need to give it that punchiness that we gave to our gradient circle. So keyframe assistant, easy ease out. Keyframe assistant, easy ease in. Looks a little better, but it's still not what we need. So we're going to go back into our graph editor and we're going to play around with this a little bit. This is kind of what I landed on. If I play this back, I like the motion here. So you're going to want to basically kind of copy something similar to what I have here. I basically just pulled this handle all the way back and I pulled this one just like so, just a little bit. I like that. As my boy Garth Brooks would say, I really like that.
And I really like that.
Now one thing you'll notice about the previous animation I made is that this profile picture also has movement to it, and ours doesn't yet, right? It's static, but it's really easy to give it a little movement. So let's do that right now. If we go to the profile picture layer and we make sure that we are lining up with the other layers, see, we're going to set a scale keyframe, and then we're going to go back and we're going to scale it down. Right now it's about 15%. Let's see what happens when we set it to about 12. Now this is going to be different for you guys than it is for me, right? Because I had a really big image that I'm working with. Yours is going to be different. So you're going to kind of just play around with it a little bit. I think we can even shrink this down a bit more. Let's see what happens when we set it to 9. Let's set it to 10. We're also going to want to easy ease this as well. So I'm going to Control Shift F9 and then Shift F9. And then still, it looks okay, but I still want to adjust it a little bit. I'm going to click this first keyframe. Let's see what happens if I do this and bring this a bit more. Okay, I like that. So the only thing we're missing now is this white bar that's between the profile picture and the Instagram story. And we can add that now. So what we're gonna do, go up to layer, new shape layer, and then this shape layer, bring it between your gradient circle and your profile picture, and let's rename this layer to white circle behind profile picture. And then let's go to the destination keyframe that we have on all of our layers, And on this white gradient behind profile picture, let's try to make a shape that is bigger than the picture of Paulina, but smaller than the gradient circle. So let's look at this. Okay, so didn't quite get it. It does fit in between these, but it's not where I want it to be. So I'm going to scale it down just a little bit, like right there. We're going to want to make sure that this is aligned. Okay, it's centered. Our anchor point again needs to be centered. So we're going to press again, Control Alt Home, or we can just press Y and hold Control and snap the anchor point to the center. And let's set a scale keyframe and then go back about, not all the way, maybe like 65-70% of the way, and we're going to shrink this circle small. And then we're going to hold Control Shift D, or simply drag the bar to this point. And you're going to see that this white circle is growing behind the profile picture, but it's not exactly where we want it to be. Yeah, that movement's no good, right? We want to smooth it out, make it sexy like we did with the other ones. So Control Shift F9, we're going to easy ease out, and then Shift F9, we're going to easy ease in. Let's play that back. Still not exactly where we want it to be, so we're going to go into the graph editor. Let's go ahead and grow this quicker and bring it to a steady stop, kind of how we've been doing with all the other ones. That looks good, right? What do you guys think? So that basically concludes this portion of the tutorial, but we're only a part of the way there. Now we need to build the rest, all of this stuff that's rendering right now. So that's the next step. That's what I'm going to show you guys how to do after this commercial break. Just kidding. We're going to get straight into it. Next step, new composition. Let's call this composition IG profile scroll. Same settings. Now the composition we just created, the Instagram profile picture comp, we're going to drag that into the new composition we just made. Hit the playback bar, and right when the animation stops, stop playback and set a scale keyframe. Move forward a little bit, set another scale keyframe, and then let's shrink this in size to about, for me, about 43. Let's easy ease out this first keyframe, easy ease this keyframe, and then go into the graph editor and give this a little punch. That looks great. Now there's a little bit too big of a gap here from when this animation stops and this one begins. So what I'm going to do is just select both of these keyframes and move it back. Let's see. There we go. Looks great. Now right after this second keyframe, we're going to scroll forward a little bit. Under position, let's set a keyframe. Scroll forward just another little chunk of time, kind of similar to how I have it here. Set another keyframe. Grab this profile picture layer, move it to about a third of the way into the composition, and then let go. Easy ease out, easy ease in, graph editor, and look what happens. You see here, we don't see handles like we normally do, so we can't enhance this motion the way we would like. The fix to that is go over here to position, right click on position, and then separate the dimensions. Since we're moving it along the X axis, select this keyframe on the X position, and then go into Graph Editor, and now you see that the handles are back. There we go, that looks better. I think we need a little bit more punch, and then we're gonna drag. I want this to go a little longer. So we'll drag this keyframe out. There we go, that looks nice. So let's just look at what we have so far. That's what I'm going for. I like when I say, like, let's just look at what we have so far. I kind of feel like, but when Bob Ross was painting and he's like, let's just go ahead and see how this animation's turning out so far. Yeah, this looks good. Let's just go ahead and add a little keyframe there, add a little keyframe here. Yeah, we'll just touch this keyframe up just a little. So the next thing we're gonna do is start adding some text. The first thing we're gonna do is add your name. New layer, text layer. And I'm just gonna put your name. And then the font I'm using is Freight, which I did a little research. If this isn't the font that Instagram uses, it's very similar. So I was able to sort of accomplish that look with this font. We're gonna wanna make a guide right here that we can align our text against. So go up to view, make sure that rulers are shown and that guides are shown. Come over here to this ruler and drag out a line to about right here. Now go back up to view and make sure that snap to guides is selected. With that selected, drag your name right up to this guide and it should snap right against it, and that's what we want. Now find the keyframe that we ended on, which is right here on our Instagram profile picture layer. Under your name layer, let's set a position keyframe, and then let's go to these keyframes here and set another position keyframe, and now drag this text up. Easy ease out, easy ease in. Again, separate dimensions. Now we're working with the y-axis, so we'll select this keyframe. Now the effect we're going for here is one of that this text is getting out of the way just in the nick of time. It's kind of sliding right under this profile picture as it zooms by on top. This sort of shape is giving me that effect pretty positively. I like it. One thing I don't like right now is how close this text is to the profile picture. So I'm going to go back, and on the y-axis I'm just going to drag this down just a little bit more. That looks good to me. So the next layer we're going to create is going to be the description layer right here, this layer. And what this layer does is just sort of tells your story. It's like your bio layer. Let's go ahead and select the type tool. I'll just call this one description section. Let's select all this text, and I want to kind of grade this text, make it a little lighter because that's how it looks on Instagram. And then I think we're gonna shrink it to about, let's see what happens when we make it about maybe 35. That looks cool. And then you're gonna drag this over to again, and it's gonna snap. This section just really kind of shows how basic you are. Maybe you want to write live, love, laugh, because that's what like 80% of the girls I follow have in their description. No shade, but it's true. Maybe you're a photographer, storyteller, I don't know, editor. That's kind of what I do. So I'll just put that there for now. Find these keyframes again on the Your Name layer under the photography, storyteller, editor, description layer, whatever it is for you. Click down on transform. We're going to set a position keyframe. And then we're going to go back to where these keyframes are. And we're going to drag this up to kind of like right underneath it. Now that doesn't look good yet, obviously. We're gonna kind of have to tinker this one a little bit. The goal here, and I'll show you as I go, keyframe, easy ease out, easy ease in, separate dimensions, go into the graph editor, now I'm gonna kind of mess around with this for a second and you guys will kind of see my process. That's kind of close, but not quite. Let's see. That's a little better. I want them to kind of, yeah, I mean there. That's pretty much it. I like that. One thing you can do here that I think kind of gives this a cool look is, and it's kind of hard to describe, I'm just going to show you guys, but on the Y position on this first keyframe, let's kind of make this kind of overlap a little bit with this. We'll directly overlap. There we go. That looks more interesting to me. I'll show you what we're going to do. So go over here to these keyframes, set your opacity, and then scroll back to these first keyframes. Bring your opacity to 0. Do the same thing on the Your Name layer. Down to 0. Now look. Oh, it's not perfect. I'm gonna tweak it a little bit. Okay, this is like a style choice. I like how both of these text layers look like they're shooting from the same spot. I don't know why. It's more interesting to me. I'm happy with that. Now let's get into the one thing everyone obsesses over, which is the numbers, you know, the shit that makes you look cool on Instagram, how many followers you have, all that stuff. We'll start with the post number. So let's say you've posted 500 posts. You're gonna change this to the Arial regular 50. And then make sure that it's black. I'll rename this layer to the post count. Now again, just as we did in the Instagram profile picture comp we made earlier, we're kind of like, all of these keyframes are gonna kind of line up. Everything's gonna kind of land at the same time. So when I reference these, I'm either gonna say the destination keyframes or the beginning keyframes. I'm describing either where this takes off or where it lands, right? So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So under post count, let's drag this somewhere that kind of makes sense, right about here. On the destination keyframes, let's set a position key. And then we're going to scroll to the beginning keyframes and we're going to move this over just a little bit. Now we obviously want to create more dynamic motion to this, right? We're going to easy ease out, easy ease in, and then we're going to separate dimensions. Now we're working with the x-axis, right? So click on this keyframe, go into your graph editor, and we want to sort of play with this a bit and see what we come up with. Okay, I like that. Now let's go ahead, duplicate this layer. We're gonna rename this layer to follower count and then select all the keyframes in it. Make sure that your time indicator is over these destination keyframes. Move it over holding shift so that it stays lined up with this number. Move it to about right here. When I say this number, I mean the post count number. So now this is your follower count, right? So I don't know, let's just say you have like 1,000 followers because you cool and shit. That's not exactly what we're going for just yet. Again, sort of what I described over here with things coming from like an origin point. We want this 1,000 to also look like it's traveling further than the 500. At least stylistically, that's what I'm going for. So on the X point, on the beginning keyframe, we're going to move it further over, like right next to the 500. Let's see what that does. Cool. I like that. Duplicate this one more time. Our follower count is now going to become our following count. Select all the keyframes, all the keys, and we're gonna move this over again to about right here. I'm holding down shift again so that way all these numbers continue to line up, just to differentiate it. Say you follow 2,000 people. Okay, we want to make sure that this number, again, want to make sure that it's traveling further. So drag this one over now. Cool. That looks good. So right now we're going to continue to make some little adjustments that I think will make this animation a bit more interesting. The post count is cool, but on the follower count, let's just grab these keyframes and move it over a few frames and see what that does. Now we'll do that again on the following count. Grab the keyframes, move it over just a few more frames than the one below it. Maybe a hair, a couple more. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna make these fade in. So on following count, under opacity, on the destination keyframes, we're gonna set the opacity key, and then we're going to scroll back, not the full way, maybe like halfway, maybe even a little less. There we go. I like that. And then we're going to go down to this layer, our follower count layer, set an opacity key that lines up with these keys, and go back similar amount, set this to 0. And then we're going to do the same thing on the post count layer. Line up with these keys, set an opacity key, and scroll back similar amount, set this to 0. Let's play it back and see how that looks. Yeah, that's kind of cool. That 1,000 number is like a little too far to the right, so let's select these keys, make sure our indicator is right over this, over these keys, and then we're going to move this over just a little bit. Cool. Now we're going to add the text that goes underneath each of these numbers. That's identifying your posts, your followers, your following, right? Again, we're using freight, sans medium, 34 points. Select the type tool. We're gonna write posts. Select this text, freight, and then 34. And I want to match this gray that we used down here on the photographer storyteller editor thing, your description. So I'm going to copy paste, and then under posts, I'm going to paste that same gray. What's going to happen here if you look at this previous animation I did, and this is kind of what I'm going to fashion the one we're working on after. Look right here where it says posts. See how it kind of grows out from underneath the number, and they all kind of cascade into place. The posts, the followers, and the following, right? Boom, boom. We're looking right here. That's kind of what we're going to try to recreate. And we can create a guide here that lines up with these squares here. Kind of doesn't have to be perfect, but like right there. There we go. So now we know that our post text is centered with this number. Now where the post count lands under this post text now, and because I'm OCD, I'm going to capitalize this and call it post text. We're going to set a position key, and then we'll go back to our beginning keys. I'll set another position key, and then we're just going to drag the post up on this text. We're going to easy ease out, easy ease in, separate the dimensions, and since we're working with the y-axis, click on the y. Now this one we want to there we go, that's kind of cool. Maybe a little less, so that it looks how I have it here. This is kind of the curve you're going to be going for. One of the things we can do right now is move the Instagram profile picture to the top layer. That way these items are going to appear behind it. So under the post text, we're also going to give this some opacity, an opacity fade in. So we'll start it at 0. We don't want it to show before this moves by it, so let's move this forward a bit. Okay, that's kind of cool. Let's duplicate this layer now, and we're going to rename it to followers text. And let's make sure that the time indicator is over these keyframes. Click on this layer now and hold shift and move it over to here. Let's pull another guide over so that it lines up with these red squares here, and make sure that this text now says followers. Make sure that it is centered here. Since we staggered these numbers out, if I go to my follower count and I find where these keyframes end, I'm going to want a line of the followers text with those keyframes as well. So moving on, we're going to duplicate this followers text and rename it to following text. And then let's make sure that this text now says following. Select all the keys. Make sure that your time indicator is over these keyframes. And then move this entire layer underneath the following number. Again, you guys can add a guide here to perfectly line it up. I'm going to kind of just eyeball it for the sake of time. The following count, look at where these keyframes end. Let's line all of this up with those keyframes. Next, we're going to create the follow bar, which is essentially this right here. In our active composition, the IG profile scroll, go up to the rectangle tool, and we're going to draw a rectangle. Doesn't have to be perfect. We can tweak all this stuff later, but let's do about that size. Let's change the fill. I'm going to grab this exact color. I know I pulled this color from an Instagram image. It is 5294EB. I'll put this in the description again as well. We actually want to move the anchor point to right about here because we're going to grow this shape from the left to the right. We're going to press Y and we're going to move this anchor point to right about here. Now, as all these other objects are kind of ending, we also want this follow bar to grow and stop at that point as well. How we're going to do that is if we go to this shape layer, the rectangle transform, we're going to turn constant proportions off, and we're going to set a scale keyframe where these keyframes begin on the following text, our starting point again. We're going to line up on the shape layer, and let's also rename this to follow bar. So we have that scale key that we already made. Let's make another scale key, because as you'll see here, when I shrink this now, we want it to shrink from that point. So I'm going to set the scale here to 0. Let's just play this back. Obviously not perfect, right? Let's adjust this a bit and see what we can come up with. Let's easy ease out, easy ease in. Let's definitely play with the graph editor. That looks good to me. Something like that. And one thing we need to do is, you'll notice this follow bar has rounded angles on it right here. We're going to need to do the same thing here. We can do that under rectangle path, the roundness. Let's see how it looks right now. Let's zoom in a bit. Right now it's just a straight up rectangle. But if we add a bit of roundness, let's see how we like that. Yeah, that looks good. Let's make sure that the Instagram profile picture is above the follow bar, right? So it's going to grow behind it. So let's zoom out and play back. We don't want to see the bar too soon, right? See how it's popping up here? So let's move to about right here. And on the follow bar, let's set an opacity key. Drag this down to 0. And then move to the destination keyframe. Bring this back up to 100. See how that looks now. I like that. That looks good. The next step is to add the text inside of the follow bar. So let's do that now. We're going to go ahead and make a text layer. It says follow. Freight, sans medium, 34. We can leave all that. Let's make this white though. Let's move this text right over the center. We can give this a little motion too. Let's set a position key here under the follow text that lines up with the other keys, and then scroll back a little and just move this over just a little bit. Easy ease out. Easy ease in. That looks terrible, but we're about to make it look cool. Let's maybe drag this back a bit, and then separate dimensions. Again, we're only working with the x-axis, so let's click on a keyframe on the x-axis. Let's bring this so that it comes to a slow stop, and let's ramp up the speed here. Yeah, cool. Moving on. The next component to this animation is going to be this drop down little tab right here that you would see on Instagram when you want to, like, I don't know, press this and I think it shows you more information on the user. So what we're going to do is duplicate this follow bar, and then let's rename this follow bar to drop down tab, and then we're going to move it over, and under contents, under rectangle path, we're going to turn off constant proportions, and we're going to shrink this down to about something like that. That might be a little too big actually. Let's shrink it down just a little bit more. There we go. Let's play this back now and see how we like it. This drop down tab always has a little white arrow in it on Instagram. One idea you can do is go up here to layer, create a new solid. This is kind of like a quick and dirty way I would do it. You might have like a way more sophisticated way, but this is just what I would do. Do like 50 by 50 points, just so we have a small object here. And then literally over this object, let's create a new shape layer, change the fill to white, and then over this shape layer, which we can rename to white arrow. So over this square, bring in a guide right to the center, and then as you have this white arrow layer selected, go to the top corner of this square, press the pen tool once, go to this corner, holding shift, press it again, and then go down to the bottom here, add another point, and then close it off up here. Now obviously these don't line up with your pen tool selected, just move it right over the top of your guideline. You can just select this pen point, holding shift, and just drag it up the line. So now we've kind of got like a shorter arrow. Grab this white arrow. Let's zoom out a little so we can kind of see what we're working with. Take this white arrow and put it over this shape, and let's shrink it down. It's a little too big. Let's make sure that the anchor point is in the center of this shape that we just created. So again, you can use this tool, the pan behind tool, and drag it, holding control, and bring it here to the center. So now we can resize this arrow a little bit. So let's resize it to like right about there. Now we can add a guide on this drop down tab, just so we can kind of line up the arrow with it and just kind of move it over a little. There we go. Well, let's zoom out so we can kind of see it. Boom. Yeah, that looks cool. Starting to come together, starting to look like an actual Instagram profile. So we've done a lot of the work here. We're pretty much set on all of this information here. Now we need to kind of focus on making some of these little details that are going to kind of add more life to the animation. Something as simple as this little gray line, which we'll do next. Such a simple thing to make. What we're gonna do now is create another layer, new shape layer. Let's just call this layer growing line. And I'm literally just gonna draw a rectangle pretty thin all the way across, and then we're gonna fill it with a light gray color. I think that's what I had on the other one. And one thing we'll do here is we'll even shrink this line down even more. So under rectangle here, rectangle path, under size, we're going to turn off constant proportions, and we're going to shrink this down to like, shrink it down to like 2. We'll set a keyframe on size here, right as the profile picture is landing right here. And then we'll go back to where it starts, and we'll set another keyframe for size. And on this keyframe, we're going to shrink it down to 0. Now we want it to kind of, again, have a punchier move to it. So we're going to easy ease out, easy ease in. And then we're going to go to the graph editor, and we're going to just kind of modify this movement a little bit. Let's have it ramp really fast and then come to a more gradual stop, and let's see how we like that. Actually no, maybe let's try the other way. Let's see if it starts slow and then speeds up. Let's see how this works. That's kind of cool, right? Like this. There we go. That looks good. So if you kind of copy the shape I have here, you're going to get a similar movement. The next step is adding your username right here. It's going to appear above the bar we just built. So you see it kind of pops up. It's masked, so it's coming from above that line that we just designed, so it kind of has this cool appearing out of nowhere effect. So let's go ahead and get that started. So let's go back here. I'm just going to write username. And let's go ahead and change this to freight. 50 points. So I just align mine here in the center by pressing the align horizontally, and it's gonna just kind of hang out right here. And then what we want to do is we're gonna give this some motion. So let's go ahead and right where everything kind of lands, let's set a position keyframe, and then maybe go about this far back. I mean, it's really kind of up to you guys. I'm gonna start here, and we'll kind of tweak it as we go. Hold shift and then just drag this down below the line. And then let's also give this some ease. Let's pull this back a little and give it a little bit more space. We have to separate the dimensions, and then we're going to use the graph editor. So we're working with the y-axis. Let's give it a little more oomph in the beginning and then have it slow down. Let's see what this does. That's kind of cool. Maybe it should come a little quicker. Yeah, that looks nice. So something like this shape here is going to give you this effect. So what we need to do to make sure that this username is disappearing, and then I'm also just going to rename this to top username. We're going to need to, this is how I recommend you do it. Let's create a new layer, shape layer. Change it to black. And then let's draw a solid over all the way down to the gray line that we made. Now what we're going to do is on this top username layer, we're going to alpha matte that to that shape. So now the text is only appearing where that black bar is, which is exactly what we want. Moving on, one thing you'll need, and I'll include a link in the description, but you're gonna need the Instagram logo. I just found this on Google. I Google searched Instagram logo PNG. There it is, super big. So we're gonna scale this down pretty far, somewhere like right there. Let's put it like right here. You guys can put it wherever you want. This is how I have previously done it, so I recommend it. It'll look cool this way. So right where the username is kind of stopping, we're also gonna set a position keyframe for this Instagram logo, and then we're gonna pull it back to about right here, and then we're gonna move this logo in on the x-axis just a little bit, and then we're gonna easy ease out, easy ease in, and then we're going to separate the dimensions here. We're working on the x-axis, so now we'll go into our graph editor, and let's give this some speed in the beginning and kind of slow it down, just like we've been doing with everything else. See how that kind of comes to a, almost looks like, you know, when Wile E. Coyote in the old cartoons kind of comes to a stop, and then there's that big poof of like smoke behind him. That's the kind of stop you're looking for. That's ski. So what we want to do is on these first keyframes, let's set the opacity and make it 0, an opacity key, and then we'll go to where it stops and make it 100. And then let's play this back and see how it looks. Okay, so let's see what happens when we drag this out. I don't love the way it looks yet. I drag the opacity out a little. I want it to kind of fade in as it's mid slide. Yeah, there we go. That looks cool. Maybe I want it to start moving a little bit earlier. So I'm gonna pull these keys out just a little. I'm just kind of tweaking it. And then I'm gonna pull the opacity back now a little bit. Yeah, I think I like that a little better. Next, so we're gonna add these 3 little dots that you see right here in the top right corner. That's very simple. So all we're gonna do is create a new text layer. We're just literally gonna type 3 dots, and then let's find a nice spot for them. It's basically gonna be somewhere like right over here. Kind of similar distance as like Instagram to the username. We're gonna kind of put this over here somewhere. In order for those to write onto the screen, just pull up your effects and presets window and then type in animate in typewriter. I believe that's the one we want, typewriter. Yep. So just drag that over the dots, and then you're gonna have to make sure that you adjust where it animates in. So if you go into text and you go animator 1, range selector, this is your keyframes. That it kind of auto generates some keyframes. That's obviously not what we want. So let's move this back and let's move this one too. Kind of want it to go a little faster. Let's see. Just trying to find the sweet spot here. Play it back. Yeah, that's not bad. That basically concludes the top portion of your Instagram profile. We've pretty much created everything we need to up top. So now we can move on to the images that are gonna populate underneath your profile. Now you'll notice everything is kind of moving in unison, right? Like everything populates the screen and then everything moves together really smoothly. It's almost like you're using your finger to scroll on a cell phone. I'm going to show you guys how we accomplish that. So what you want to do is we're now going to create a new layer, and this is going to be a null object. So if I now attach all of these layers to this null object, then I only have to move that null object and they'll all move together. Shift and select all of these layers. And let's parent these layers to this null object. When I move this null object, everything's gonna move together. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of find right where the animation stops, maybe even a hair before it stops. And on this null object, let's create a position key. So right where it's stopping, we created a position key, and then let's go forward a little. I'm kind of just guesstimating here. I went forward, I don't know, about a second, a little over a second. And now with the null object selected, I'm gonna move everything up and just to where it passes the username. Again, we need to give some sexiness to this movement. So we're gonna ease out, ease in, and let's do like we've been doing. Let's pull things out. That's way too fast, right? So let's slow this down. I think we need to, I'm gonna pull these keys back a little bit, and I'm gonna pull these forward a little bit to sort of elongate this animation a bit. Let's see how this looks. That's cool, right? It's similar to what I did before. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty close. So I think we'll stick there. That looks good. So now we need to start creating our images. So on the previous version I already made, you'll notice that these images, they're kind of sliding in from an invisible place, right? Like you don't know where they're coming from. The trick to this, or how I created it, is I created a new composition for each image, and then within that composition we're animating the image. Now you're probably, if you're new to After Effects, you're probably like, what the fuck did you just say? It's not that crazy. It's really simple. You're gonna be kind of blown away by how simple it is actually. First thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna create a new folder here and just call it temp photo comps, because I already have this stuff built, but I'm gonna build it again now for you guys. So we're gonna create a new composition, and we're gonna call this one photo 1, and we're gonna change the composition size to 620 by 620 because we want it to be square. Now in this comp, we're gonna toggle the transparency grid, so that way we're giving this composition an alpha layer. And then we're gonna start dragging in our photos. So I have photos here that I'm gonna use. Photos I'm gonna use are photos from our lens challenge video. These are amazing photos from my girlfriend Flannery, Jessica Kobasi, the goddess of YouTube photography, and then Brandon Wolfel, one of the craziest, most talented photographers I've ever met, and the sweetest kid ever. Let's start here with this first photo. This is a photo that Brandon took of Paulina, and we are going to scale this image down. So one thing you could do to save a little time here is, if you have Photoshop, you can actually go and crop the images you're going to use as a square already. Since I didn't do that, and since I sort of like to adjust to find the perfect spot I want the photo to be in, right? So like this looks good to me, probably right about here. But if I try to like slide this in, there's like excess photo that I need to get rid of. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to pre-compose this photo, move all attributes into the new composition. We're going to call this photo 1 pre-comp. See if that does it. You want to make sure you move all attributes into the new composition. That way it trims all the image that we're not going to use. That's important. So now again, I'm going to reorganize everything. Photos. Put this photo here. Photo 1. And then I'm going to drag these into it. Cool. So the next thing you want to do is, at the very beginning of your timeline, move forward just a few frames, maybe like a second in, and set a position key, and then move back to the beginning of your timeline and drag this image off screen. Very boring, right? We're gonna make this look a lot better though by giving it an easy ease out, easy ease in, and then we're going to separate the dimensions. We're working with the x-axis. We're going to go into our graph editor. We're going to bring this in fast, slow it down slow, give it a little bit more of an S shape here. That's nice, right? Okay, and then we're going to give this some motion blur, right? So we're going to turn on motion blur, and then we're going to also turn it on here on the layer. So now if we go back to this profile scroll, we can now bring in this photo 1 layer, and we're going to kind of place it right here. Just temporarily, we're going to find a little spot for it. So let's say right here. And then right when this lands where it stops, that's where this is going to start to come in. Maybe even a little sooner. Let's see. So you'll notice this is really close to this. I don't like the way this looks, right? I'm going to click on the null object, and I'm going to drag everything up just a little bit so that we give these photos a little bit more room. So let's move it to about right there, and that space looks nice, right? Yeah, that looks good. Now this is not exactly where it's gonna live just yet, but let's create 2 more, and then I'm gonna show you guys how we're gonna line these up perfectly together so that they're evenly spaced how I have these. So the next thing we're gonna do is, quite simply, you can just duplicate your photo 1 comp, duplicate it, and then rename it to photo 2. We're going to create another folder called photo 2. We're going to drag this duplicated composition into it. And then we're going to double click on that comp. Then we're going to delete this pre-comp that's inside of it. And then we're going to drag in another photo. So I already had all these photos ready to go. So here we go. Again, I'm going to find where I want this image to be. Let's just say I want to leave it here. Okay, cool. So one thing we can do to save time is we can go back into our photo 1 comp, and we can we're actually just working with the X the X axis so we can just copy these keys. I'm using Control C to copy, and then come back into this comp and, oh actually, I'm sorry, I skipped a step. So I still have those keys copied, but remember, we have to pre-comp this this image, and we're gonna call this now photo to pre-comp. And there it goes, it appears right underneath. So again, now this is a square. So now all I'm going to do, I'm going to just paste those keyframes I just copied. And now it's moving exactly the same as the other image, which is what we want. We want everything to move the same way. So again, just drag it in. Doesn't have to be in the perfect spot just yet. And then we're going to move this layer so that it starts a little bit after the first photo comes in. So you can kind of tinker with it. Again, this is definitely based on like personal preference. How fast you want your images to be coming on screen. You could go slower, right, which has its own look. You could have them all, you could have an entire row appear at the same time. I like to stagger them just slightly, so something kind of along the lines of, yeah, like that. Boom. And then we're going to pull it out so that it's kind of staggered the way, again, however you like to do it. Maybe something like this for me would look cool. Okay, we need to align all of these so that they're evenly spaced, right? So what I'll do is, on these outside images, I just kind of eyeball the spacing here on the left. There are probably ways to do it totally perfectly, but I'm not going to do it that way today. I'm just kind of, like I said, I'm eyeballing it. They were like almost right where they needed to be already. But look, I think if I show you guys, I can move these kind of a little offset, and then you'll see a bit more how it works. What you actually need to use first is distribute horizontally, and then you need to align vertically. There you go. That's the trick. Let's select these photos, and now let's parent them to the null layer. And then let's drag them back a little bit so that they come onto the screen sooner. Maybe a little less. So as the entire animation's stopping, so are the photos, right? So it's a cool effect. Maybe that's not what you're going for. You don't have to do that. We need to parent them to the null layer no matter what, but I kind of like something like that. That looks cool to me, right? So that's basically it. I'm gonna kind of speed through the next 6 images just so you guys can see what it looks like. I'm not gonna show you, because now that you've done one row, you could do 100 rows. The only important thing you guys need to know is that now, after this has stopped, boom, right here, we're gonna add another key for the Y position. And then we're going to move forward again, and then we're going to move, and then we're going to move forward again on the timeline, and then we're going to now move this Y position up. And I think in order to make space for another row, we're going to cut off these top images a little bit. That's not very sexy motion, right? So we're gonna play again with the graph editor. I think we want it to go a little faster in the beginning, and we want it to come to a slow stop. You'll notice here what's kind of happening. Let's see how this looks. That looks better, right? We're really trying to sort of simulate what it's like to scroll on your phone. I think there's too much of a delay here, so I'm gonna pull these back. Even still, it seems like it's kind of taking too long. So what happens when we bring it back even a little bit more? And then let's speed up the beginning of this animation here. It's maybe crazy, right? I mean, it's taken me hours to do this, and I don't even know how long this video is going to end up, but we basically have spent all this time to make something that so far is just about 6 seconds long. That's the thing with animation. It takes forever to make things that look professional. But I think that, you know, I always like to think, how do you separate yourself from all the other creators that are out there? Anyone can pick up a camera. Not a lot of people can shoot great video. Even less of those shooters that shoot great video can edit great videos. And an even smaller percentage of those people who not only shoot and edit their videos can add really cool animations to them. So just, I'm always trying to think, like, how do I continue to make myself super valuable? Okay, tuning back in just for a second, just so you guys don't think I abandoned you. Again, remember, you want to parent, you're gonna want to parent these photos to the null for object that we created here. So I'm gonna drag this to the top, and this photo 4 now is now also going to be parented to this null. I waited until the animation had come to a stop, and I put everything where I want it to be, right? You want to parent it where you want it to be. You don't want to parent it like, look what happens if I did this. So let's say that here, let's say I'm like, oh, okay, this is where I want the image, right? So then I go back here, and now I parent it to the null. Look what happens. It stays right where I parented it. So let's undo that, and then let's move forward and parent it precisely where I want it to be within the composition. We're going to parent it to the null. And then now you can scroll it to your desire of like when you want it to pop in. Okay, so I think we're done. I showed you guys how to do 1, 2, and 3, these first 3 images. You could just continue this on as long as you want, right? Like hypothetically, you could do 20, 50, 100 photos. I just did 9 because I feel like, you know, when people think of an Instagram grid, they always think of like, what's the 9 photos you see right away on someone's Instagram? Having said that, let's play it back. The After Effects animation portion of this design is done. If you've come this far with me, congratulations, pat yourself on the back. You made something really cool. We're gonna add the phone footage now, and then we're essentially going to cut out the iPhone screen and insert this animation. Let's go ahead and create a new folder, call it footage, and then we're going to import. I have a clip already ready to go. I'm going to show you guys this clip right now. So this is basically the clip. It's short, something that Flan and I shot for the Lens Challenge video. In my opinion, the key to using this animation and achieving the highest polished effect is you're going to want to shoot a camera on some sort of stabilizer or gimbal. This is my Sony a6500, and I used the Zhiyun crane to accomplish this shot. I'm using the 10 to 18 millimeter lens. So that lens, that camera, and that piece of equipment I've used more than anything in my filmmaking career. I'll include a link to all of those products in the description of this video, and I highly recommend them. You'll see this type of camera work in pretty much all of my videos, and they're actually all very affordable pieces of equipment. Nothing that is gonna like blow the bank, and they're the kinds of equipment where you buy them and you're gonna make your money back by making epic videos for people. So what I'm gonna do now is create a new composition. let's make this composition, let's say that let's just make it 30 seconds long. We want it to be 1920 by 1080. And we're gonna call this composition phone fly into IG. And we'll just call it version 1, because you know, who knows, you may want to make more down the line. Drag this footage in of Flan. You'll notice this clip is really short. Okay, so we can leave that there for now, right? This is our full animation, right? So let's find that up here in our composition folder. And in our new comp, we can drag this in. Oh, you'll notice there's a mistake. This arrow is appearing. We don't want that arrow to appear yet. I didn't notice because it's white, but I'm gonna go back. You guys may have also made this mistake with me. And we can effectively, we can drag this over. So now that arrow is gonna appear only after a little while on screen. So let's go back to our comp. We need to now seamlessly match these shots together. So that way we're going to fly into, and obviously this is not Flan's Instagram profile. This is just like a hypothetical profile. We could have made one of hers, but these are just photos I had on hand, really easy to grab. So here's what we're gonna do. Go to a frame where the full screen of the phone is visible, maybe like right here. Now that we've stopped it on this frame where you can see the entire screen, we're gonna go up to composition and we're gonna do save frame as, and we're gonna save it as a file. We're gonna change the file type to JPEG. And then we're going to make sure that it has high image quality. We're basically just going to export this. So we'll just create a folder and call it screen grabs. Whatever, you can call it whatever you want, and then we'll just call this Flan's phone screen. Save it, render it. Renders really quick because it's just a photo. Now let's zoom in, and I basically am just making sure the clip ends right there on this frame that we just exported for. So now in my photos, let's drag in this screen grab. Great. And then I'm going to essentially just cut the layer here right on, and that's Control-Shift-D on PC. You could also, if you don't, because I don't know what the keyboard shortcut is, you just go to the beginning of it, drag it all the way, right? So now this clip is basically, doop, it's gonna stop right there. And that's what we want. So now what we're gonna do is on the photo, now we're gonna go up here to the pen tool, and on the layer that is the JPEG that we just imported, we're going to essentially cut this out. Boom. So this is not yet what we want. Now we need to drop this menu down on this JPEG, and under masks, we're going to subtract it. So now we essentially, if you notice now, there's an alpha layer behind it because there's nothing there now. We've masked out the phone screen. So now there's nothing here, right? But if we play it, we still need this, we still need the camera to zoom through the phone, right? So what we're gonna do is on the first key of this JPEG, we're gonna go to transform. We're gonna set a position and a scale key, and then we're gonna zoom forward, I don't know, maybe about this far. This is like 1, 2, 3, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 frames. we can tweak it until we find what we like. And then you're just going to zoom in. You're going to scale it up pretty far. Now, not quite what we want just yet. One thing that's really going to help this add to the effect that it's real is we need to give it motion blur. So on this, now you'll notice that I just turned on the motion blur, and look at it now. I mean, it's pretty much there, right? Very simple. It moves so fast that everything just happens so quick that you barely even notice. Obviously, the quality of the JPEG is going to drop, but the motion blur is going to essentially make it negligible. You don't even really notice it. You can kind of mess around here with the ease of these keys. You know, let's say you maybe want to give it a different speed at which it zooms in. So we can go here now and kind of play around. Let's see how this looks. That one goes really fast. We could ease into it and slow down quite a bit as it gets there. We could also elongate this a little just so the effect lasts a little bit longer. You don't want it to go so fast that people don't know what's going on. So now we need to bring this IG profile, this animation. We already have this comp in here. We need to bring it below this phone screen layer. And let's move it to the front and see what happens when we just, I'm probably gonna have to adjust this, but let's just see how it looks right out the box. I mean, honestly, you don't really have to adjust it. Only thing that we're gonna need to now do is make sure that, there we go. I had the transparency grid on. So let's watch this back one more time. Come into the movie theater with me. Let's get cinematic for a second. Let's see what this looks like with all the bells and whistles added. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for sticking through. I'm proud that you made this. Your mom would be proud. Your parents would be proud if they put you through film school and it cost them like $250,000 and you don't have any short films yet to show and you're not headed to the Academy Awards. Hopefully you could send them this clip and be like, look, Mom, look what I learned for free on YouTube. Actually, don't tell them you learned it for free, because then they'll be like, what the fuck? Why did we send you to film school? I am totally taught by the internet. The internet has been my teacher, and I am so stoked to finally be contributing to the tool that has taught me everything I know, the beautiful, wonderful world of YouTube, where I've learned so much of the After Effects things that I do. This is my first tutorial. I hope you guys liked it. I hope it wasn't too boring. I hope I didn't fuck up too much. Hopefully you guys are down to see more stuff. I have a lot of other little tricks I like to do, other graphics I like to make. This is just the beginning. Obviously this is free. This tutorial is free on YouTube, but if you purchase the template, I'm also going to throw in a version that is Instagram ready. So you just plug in your photos and it actually stops perfectly on a 1080 by 1080 composition. That way you can freeze it at 9 photos. And this is like ready to go, already formatted for Instagram. So this is not going to be included on the channel. This is only available if you buy the template. The link is in the description. I look forward to making more of these.